I can tell you firsthand that as a keyboard player, one of the most interesting and intriguing parts of our industry are the instruments that fall into the workstation and synthesizer category. But getting into that world can be incredibly intimidating. In fact, the move from a stage piano experience to a workstation experience can feel like you're going from riding a bicycle to operating a jetliner. It's a huge jump in complexity, and it often keeps people from engaging in what would otherwise be some really fun features. So at first, when I heard that Roland was coming out with yet another 88-note stage piano product type thing, I was a little skeptical that this was really going to have a new audience that all of their other products hadn't already addressed really well. But then I actually got in front of the Roland Juno D, and I realized that this is the bridge between a stage piano and a workstation, and something that's going to allow a ton of piano-focused musicians to start playing with and accessing some of these features without the intimidation factor. And that got me really excited. But what I also love about the Juno is that for people who do really get into this stuff, there's an extra layer to underneath that surface appearance of simplicity and accessibility that allows you to future-proof this purchase and really grow into it as a very sophisticated musician. But I would say for 90% of musicians, this is going to be the right balance of simple to use but otherwise fairly sophisticated tools like sequencing and sampling, and what otherwise is just a very capable stage piano. First, I want to address its simple design and its approachable layout. And for sure, we're going to have a listen to some of those great onboard sounds, which, by the way, is being delivered by their Zencore engine and into the thousands. We'll do a little bit of work on the sequencer so you can see just how easy and simple it is to start using this, and then finish off with a few final thoughts. Let's get started. First, let's talk about why this Juno D is so much less intimidating than a full workstation without really pulling back any of the key feature areas. To me, workstations kind of follow the 80-20 rule, which is that 80% of the users out there are probably only using about 20% of the features, and the inverse. That might even be closer to 90-10. Because when you look at a full workstation such as the Phantom, the layers of complexity and the options that are offered up to musicians, these are suggestions and asks from the professional community that have been coming from the most niche applications for like 40 years as these have developed and evolved over time. And for the average musician just starting to engage with concepts like sequencing, the layers of complexity and options can be totally overwhelming. So when we get to an instrument like the Juno, that whole 80-20 rule, basically the 20% of options that most people are going to want to use is what you can touch, feel, and see on the top of the machine. And so specifically, we're talking about the ability to quickly split and divide the keyboard, the ability to create a multi-part scene. In this case, we've got the option to do 8 versus 16, but for most people, 8 is plenty. We've also got the option to very quickly and easily select from the thousands of sounds that are loaded in here with a lot of great categorizations and push button access. So again, just accessing that library doesn't become overwhelming. It's actually really fun to go through and pick out some favorites. You've also got quick access to a basic arpeggiator, some chord memory, as well as a quick button that turns your 88 keys into a drum pad. You've got all of your transpose, and then rather than 8, 9, or 10 sliders here, you've got a 4 slider system that works really as a real-time mixer. And what's quite interesting is the way that they've set this mixer up is that by default, the left is your mic input, so you can use that great XLR input on the back, which is not phantom powered, by the way, but still you've got the ability to have a nice, industry standard mic like a 57 or 58 plugged in here, which you can then use the vocoder with or some other vocal effects. And then you've got your phrase pad slider, which affects all of the tracks from 3 through to 8, and then your lower and upper are tracks 1 and 2. So sort of an interesting twist on how to compress what would otherwise be possibly quite an overwhelming number of sliders to wrap your head around, into something that's nice and compact. Our four knobs up here are by default accessing two really common features, which is your envelope control, cutoff, resonance, attack, and release. And just by pressing knob assign, you can flip that to be your EQ setting as well. So for anybody who's not super familiar with what some of those things are, simply by hitting the knob assign, we can get our EQ up here. And so that allows us to kind of quickly sculpt a sound like a piano. Sort of hear that low end missing. Now we're sort of into AM radio territory, or if we kill the top and sort of emphasize your upper mid. Or your classic V sound. Or back to your envelope control for people who aren't too sure what that is. You can turn up the attack, the time that the sound starts when you first start playing. Or of course your frequency cutoff as well. Kind of cuts off that top, quarter or fifth of the sound. And that can be a lot of fun to play with. So without having to get into really complicated filter understanding, this gives you some great filtering options up front as well as some basic mixing. It's less than half the number of knobs and layers and sliders that you would get usually on a full workstation, but without really taking away the most functional parts. Additionally, I like the fact that the design language that they've used for the display and the whole user interface has a lot of similarities to what they're using on their higher end workstations. This is getting you the information you need on a screen. It's very, very easy to navigate. You've got your 4 arrow controls basically to navigate through all the various menu settings, as well as a data wheel to quickly scroll through. And then you've got a phrase pad, which is one of those features that everybody thinks looks super cool, and very few people are ever able to use it because it tends to be a little more complicated in terms of understanding what it does and how it relates to your playing experience. But in this case, the phrase pad is probably the best design phrase pad that I've seen on any product ever, particularly for people who are just starting out. You've got sequencer mode, rhythm mode, which allows this to be your audio is where you are going to basically load in some of your samples, and you can do that through USB. And then you've got a mute function, which you can quickly use to basically live mix. And that could be whether you're muting certain parts for like a multi-part for pure live, or you can use that in conjunction with the sequencer. So it's really clear and easy to understand what these do and the modes and how to access them. Now this is going to be personal for everybody, but for me, one of the most exciting things about workstations is the ability to sequence or compose. And that is to create layers of tracking that you can then play with and manipulate and really sort of build your own song without having to use a DAW. And in this case, the way they have built the sequencer isn't only easy to use and doesn't require tons of menus and options to really understand how to engage with it. It also works really well almost as a live looper. And the thing about live looping is the minute that you make it too complicated, you lose out on the ability to be spontaneous in the moment without being incredibly fluid with the tool. So this lets people get into sort of a live looping type of experience without really having to know very much about it at all. So because I've mentioned this multiple times already, I really want to show you how easy and how fun it is to engage with this basic phrase sequencer. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick the sounds that I'm going to want to be a part of this sequence. And so you can see that there are 4 parts visible here, but if I keep scrolling down, I'll get 7 parts, and then part R refers to the rhythm. And that's really part 8. It always is reserved for a rhythm track. I know I'm going to want part 1 to be grand piano. Part 2, I think I usually lay bass down second after the piano. So we're going to select a bass for that, and let's... Yep, that works. And then for part 3, we're going to throw a nice lush pad on there. It's a little retro, but I like that one, so we're going to go with Life Signs. Haha, very punny. And then for the 4th, I think I'm going to want to do a little bit of soloing maybe with a Rhodes, so we're going to leave that up to part 4. And so we will throw some E piano in there. Oh, those patches sound so good. So we'll go with that. And then of course for part 7, or sorry, rather part 8, we're going to have our... And that's sounding a little bit too big. Let's see if we can go with a... Yeah. And now let me show you how easy it is to start doing some sequencing. I'm going to keep this to a nice 4-bar phrase. And we can see that it's 4 bars because we've got 4 little boxes up there. We've got our metronome on. The count in is 4. This is all by default. And so I'm going to hit my play over on the sequencer, and this is going to now give me a 1-bar count in, and we're going to start playing on the piano. So now we can hear so we're going to go over to the bass now. And so now we've got bass happening, having some fun now. So let's lay some drums. Let's not forget about that pad that we got set up. So we're going to lay the pad down now. Finally, let's do a little bit of fun soloing with the E piano. So in literally just a few minutes, I've got something that I can jam over myself, and if I wanted to, I could have easily gone in and simply by pressing record again, play over top of any one of those parts and it would automatically replace it, or with 2 hits of a button, I can quickly erase the content of one track while the sequence is still going and replace it with something else totally fresh. And this is why it works so well as an intro to sequencing, but also as kind of an intro to how live sequencing, or sometimes referred to as live looping, can really work and be super fun. Now there's a few extra Easter eggs here that I do want to mention, because anybody watching this thinking that I'm really only talking about the Juno D is appropriate for beginners, there's another layer here that we're missing we haven't really mentioned. Even though the top level control surfaces and feature areas seem like they're really stripped down, one hit of the menu button and you're able to get into the full effects engine that you would normally get on the full workstation, complete with multi-effects for each individual part, insert effects that you can send through bus. So you've got your global effects, chorus, reverb, EQ, and all of those are fully editable right on the machine. So even though the out-of-the-box experience doesn't necessarily push you towards that level of intensity, if you want to explore it, it's there when you're ready. The other thing I need to mention, you can actually access the full Zencore engine from within this. Now, it's not as graphical as in some of the other environments in which you can work with Zencore, but it is there. Simply hitting the menu, you can get up to tone edit, and now you're able to get into all of the partials or the components, individual components of that sound. Anybody who's studied the Zencore engine will know that that's 4 partials that you've got to play with and an insane level of detail that you can get into. A few other last points. The Juno D, or at least the 88 note version of this, because it does come in 2 smaller versions, comes equipped with the PHA-4 action. Now, this is a fully weighted action that I'm a big fan of. Anyone who's seen the channel before will know that, so I'm not going to go off in a whole PHA-4 action spiel right now. But just suffice it to say, it's got a really great weighting to it that is very comfortable to people who have done some acoustic piano playing before. It's a little bit on the heavy side from sort of the midpoint of what you'd expect in terms of weight. So people who are a little more aggressive in their playing, or like I said, already used to piano, going to feel super at home with this action. It just has a great feel. This also has the full USB audio interface plugged in, so you can USB this to a DAW and have full 7 or 8 part discrete audio, digital, inputting straight into a recording device if you want. And a very tiny but kind of cool little feature, this can be entirely USB bus powered. You can plug this through USB-C straight into your laptop, and you do not need a power supply. So that's our first look at the Juno D. I'd love to hear what you think about this product. Is this going to fill the lane that I see this being really important for? Tell us in the comments, and as well, let us know what you thought of the video overall. Check the description for links where you can pick up the Juno anywhere in the world for some great pricing. We'll see you again soon.